What happens when a soulful singer sits across from one of television's most outspoken hosts and the conversation takes a turn nobody saw coming? What started as a routine promotional appearance for Teddy Swims on The View quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and by the end, Teddy was walking off the set, leaving the host speechless and the audience in stunned silence. This is the story of how a simple interview became a viral moment that had everyone talking. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story has layers you won't believe. The studio lights were blazing as Teddy Swims, real name Joden Dimsdale, settled into the familiar hot seat of The View. His latest album had been climbing the charts, and what should have been a straightforward promotional interview was about to become anything but routine. Joy Behar, known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue, was ready with her questions, but nobody could have predicted where this conversation was headed. "So Teddy," Joy began, leaning forward with that familiar smirk, "your music has this raw, emotional quality to it. Tell me, is that authenticity something you have to work at, or does it just come naturally when you're performing for people?" Teddy shifted slightly in his chair, his tattooed hands resting on his knees. "Well, Joy, I think authenticity isn't something you can fake. Either you're being real with people or you're not. My music comes from personal experiences, struggles I've been through, things that have shaped who I am." "Personal experiences," Joy repeated, her eyebrows raising slightly. "You know, I was reading about your background, and it's quite the journey from small-town Georgia to the big stage. But let me ask you this. In today's music industry, don't you think artists sometimes manufacture these stories of struggle to seem more relatable to audiences?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Teddy's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but those watching closely could see something change in his demeanor. "I'm sorry, are you suggesting that my experiences aren't genuine?" Teddy asked, his voice still controlled, but with an edge that wasn't there before. Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm not suggesting anything about you specifically. I'm just saying that in general, the music industry loves a good rags to riches story. Sometimes I wonder if these narratives get, shall we say, enhanced. For marketing purposes, enhanced," Teddy repeated slowly, and viewers could see his jaw tighten slightly. "Joy, with all due respect, I don't think you understand what you're implying here." Whoopi Goldberg, sensing the tension building, tried to interject with a lighter comment about the music industry. But Joy wasn't ready to let go of her line of questioning. "Look, Teddy, I'm not trying to attack you personally," Joy continued, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But you have to admit, there's a certain formula to these success stories. The struggles, the breakthrough moment, the emotional connection with fans. It's almost like a template." Teddy leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. "A template? Joy, are you seriously sitting there telling me that the years I spent working construction, playing dive bars for 20 people, dealing with rejection after rejection, that all of that was just following some kind of template?" "I'm just saying no, let me finish," Teddy interrupted, something he rarely did in interviews. "You're talking about things you clearly don't understand. You want to talk about templates? Let's talk about the template of successful talk show hosts who think they can minimize other people's real experiences because they've never had to worry about where their next meal was coming from." The studio audience, which had started the segment with polite applause, was now completely silent. You could practically hear a pin drop as the other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Joy's face flushed slightly, but she wasn't backing down. "Excuse me, I think I've had my share of struggles. Thank you very much. I didn't just fall into this career. I'm sure you've had challenges," Teddy replied, his southern accent becoming more pronounced as his emotions heightened. "But sitting here questioning whether my story is real, whether my music comes from an authentic place, that's not just insulting to me. It's insulting to everyone who's ever had to fight for something." Sarah N. attempted to redirect the conversation, asking about Teddy's upcoming tour dates, but the damage was already done. The tension between Joy and Teddy was palpable, and neither seemed willing to let the matter drop. "You know what, Teddy," Joy said, her voice taking on that familiar combative tone that regular viewers knew well. "Maybe you're being a little too sensitive here. This is television. We ask tough questions. If you can't handle that, maybe you're not ready for this level of success." The words hit like a slap across the face. Teddy's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it looked like he might explode. Instead, he took a deep breath, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Too sensitive," he said quietly, but his voice carried across the studio like thunder. "Lady, you just spent the last 5 minutes questioning my integrity, my authenticity, and my entire life story, and now you're telling me I'm too sensitive for calling you out on it." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Teddy wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and there was no stopping what came next. "You want to know what's not authentic, Joy," Teddy continued, his voice rising with each word. "Sitting behind that desk, making 6 figures to tear down people who've actually lived through something real. You want to talk about templates. How about the template of privileged media personalities, who think they can psychoanalyze someone's entire life in a 5-minute segment? Joy's mouth dropped open, clearly not expecting this level of pushback from what she probably assumed would be another compliant celebrity guest. Now wait just a minute. No, you wait, Teddy shot back, standing up from his chair. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard, including the camera operators who had to quickly adjust their shots. I came here to talk about my music, to share something I'm passionate about with your audience. Instead, you decided to turn this into some kind of gotcha moment. Whoopi tried once again to intervene, her voice calm but urgent. Okay, let's everybody just take a breath here, but Joy wasn't having it. Her competitive instincts had kicked in, and she leaned forward aggressively. Teddy, you're acting like a child right now. This is what interviews are. We ask questions, we dig deeper. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. A child? Teddy's voice cracked with disbelief. You know what's childish? Joy, sitting there with your smug little smirk, acting like you've got me all figured out when you don't know the first thing about my life. The other hosts were now visibly uncomfortable. Sunny Hostin was fidgeting with her notes, while Alyssa Farah Griffin looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The audience, meanwhile, was completely captivated by this train wreck unfolding. In real time. I know enough, Joy retorted, her voice dripping with condescension. I know that every singer who comes on this show has the same story. Tough childhood, big dreams, breakthrough moment. It's like you all went to the same media training school. That was the final straw. Teddy took a step closer to the desk, his hands clenched at his sides. Media training school. Are you out of your mind? You think sleeping in my car between gigs was media training? You think working double shifts just to afford studio time was some kind of act? I think Joy began, but Teddy cut her off with a gesture that silenced the entire studio. No, let me tell you what I think, he said, his voice now deadly calm in a way that was somehow more intimidating than when he was shouting. I think you're so disconnected from reality that you can't recognize authenticity when it's sitting right in front of you. I think you've been living in this bubble for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to actually struggle for something. Joy's face was now red with anger. How dare you make assumptions about my life? How dare I? Teddy laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich, coming from someone who's spent the last 10 minutes making assumptions about mine. The difference is, my assumptions are based on you sitting there, acting like you're better than me, while yours are based on what? Some article you skimmed before the show. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Even the crew members, who had seen their share of heated moments on The View, seemed stunned by the intensity of this exchange. Sarah N. made another attempt to salvage the situation. Maybe we can talk about the positive response to your latest single. You know what, Sarah? Teddy said, turning to address her directly. I appreciate you trying to keep this professional, but I think we're past that point now. He turned back to Joy, who was glaring at him with undisguised hostility. Here's what's going to happen, Teddy continued, his voice steady but his eyes blazing. I'm going to finish saying what I came here to say, and then I'm going to leave. And Joy, you're going to sit there and listen without interrupting me for once in your life. Excuse me, Joy sputtered. This is my show. Actually, it's all of theirs too. Teddy gestured to the other hosts, but you seem to forget that sometimes. He took a deep breath, composing himself slightly. I grew up in a town where the biggest excitement was the Friday night football game. My dad worked in a factory, my mom cleaned houses. We didn't have money for music lessons or fancy equipment. Everything I learned, I taught myself. Joy opened her mouth to speak, but something in Teddy's expression made her think better of it. When I was 22, I was living paycheck to paycheck, playing covers in bars where half the audience was too drunk to know what song I was singing. I didn't have connections in the music industry. I didn't have a trust fund to fall back on. What I had was a voice and a dream, and the stubborn refusal to give up. The studio was completely silent now. Even Joy seemed momentarily subdued by the raw emotion in Teddy's voice. So when you sit there with your comfortable salary and your guaranteed platform and question whether my story is real, whether my struggles were genuine, it doesn't just insult me. It insults every person who's ever had to choose between paying rent and chasing their dreams. Whoopi nodded slowly, clearly moved by Teddy's words. But Joy couldn't help herself. Look, Teddy, I understand you're passionate about this, but you're taking this way too personally. I'm just doing my job here. Teddy stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quiet but filled with disappointment. Your job is supposed to be having conversations with people, not tearing them down for entertainment, but clearly, we have very different ideas about what that means. He looked around at the other hosts, then directly into the camera. I want to apologize to the viewers who tuned in expecting to hear about music and instead got to witness this circus. That's not what I came here for. Joy, Teddy said, his voice carrying a finality that made everyone in the studio lean forward. I've met a lot of people in this industry. Some genuine, some fake, some just trying to make it through another day. but I've never met someone so determined to diminish others just to make themselves feel important. That's not journalism, that's just sad." The words hit Joy like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed, but for once in her career, she seemed genuinely speechless. The other hosts sat frozen, unsure whether to jump in or let this moment play out. Teddy reached down and unclipped his microphone. The small action somehow more dramatic than any grand gesture could have been. "You know what the real difference is between people like me and people like you, Joy? When I fail on my own. When you fail, you take a bunch of other people down with you. Now hold on." Joy finally found her voice, but it was too late. "I'm done holding on," Teddy replied, stepping back from his chair. "I came here as a guest, with respect for this show and what it represents. But I'm not going to sit here and let you turn my life into your personal punching bag because you're having a bad day." Whoopi made one last attempt to save the situation. "Teddy, please, let's just Whoopi. I have nothing but respect for you and what you've accomplished," Teddy said, his tone softening slightly as he addressed her. "Same goes for Sarah, Sunny, and Alyssa. You all seem like decent people who understand that interviewing someone doesn't mean attacking them." He gestured toward Joy without looking at her. "But this right here, this isn't professional. This isn't even entertaining. This is just mean-spirited, and I won't be part of it." Joy's face was now a deep shade of red, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. "You can't just walk out of an interview because you don't like the questions. Watch me," Teddy said simply, and those two words would become the most replayed moment of the entire segment. He began walking toward the edge of the set, but Joy wasn't finished. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she called after him, her voice rising to almost a shout. "You can't handle a little pushback, so you throw a tantrum and storm off. That's not very authentic, is it?" Teddy stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around and continue the fight. Instead, he spoke without turning back to face her. "You know what's authentic, Joy? Knowing when someone isn't worth your time." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I hope whatever satisfaction you get from this was worth it, because you just taught a lot of people watching at home exactly who you really are." The studio audience, which had been silent throughout most of the exchange, began to murmur among themselves. Some were clearly Team Teddy, while others seemed shocked by the whole confrontation. Joy, apparently unable to let him have the last word, stood up from her chair. "Oh, so now I'm the villain because I asked you some tough questions. This is what's wrong with your generation. You think everyone should just tell you how wonderful you are." That was the breaking point. Teddy spun around, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made even the camera operators take a step back. "My generation," he said, his voice incredulous. "Lady, my generation is out there working 3 jobs just to afford rent, dealing with a world that's falling apart, trying to find some meaning in the chaos. We don't need people to tell us we're wonderful. We need people to stop tearing us down for sport." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Teddy held up his hand. "I'm done," he said, and this time there was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion. "I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with your attitude. And I'm done pretending that what just happened here was anything resembling professional journalism." He looked directly into the camera, addressing the viewers one final time. "For anyone watching who's ever been told their dreams aren't real, their struggles don't matter, or their story isn't worth telling, don't let anyone make you feel small. Your experiences are valid, your voice matters, and you don't owe anyone an explanation for who you are or where you came from." With that, he turned and walked off the set, leaving behind a studio full of stunned faces and an audience that didn't quite know how to react. Joy, clearly flustered and trying to regain control of the situation, attempted to address the camera. "Well, that was certainly unexpected. I guess some people just can't handle." "Joy," Whoopi interrupted firmly. "Maybe we should just go to commercial." But the damage was already done. In the span of less than 15 minutes, what should have been a routine celebrity interview had turned into a viral moment that would be dissected and debated across social media for weeks to come. As the show cut to commercial break, viewers were left with the image of an empty chair where Teddy had been sitting, and the uncomfortable silence of hosts trying to figure out what had just happened. The confrontation between Teddy Swims and Joy Behar had become more than just a heated interview. It had become a symbol of the disconnect between old-school media personalities and the artists they claim to represent. A reminder that behind every success story is a real person with real struggles, and that sometimes, walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Do you think Teddy was right to walk off, or should he have stayed and continued the interview? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories about the moments when live television goes completely off the rails.